A black female CEO just wanted to sit in the first-class seat she had paid for. But right in front of dozens of passengers, she was dragged away as if her presence was a threat. No shouting, no resistance. Just the calm eyes of someone who had walked through too much injustice. But what was more terrifying was the choice she faced if she remained silent. It would pass like 1,000 other buried stories. If she stood up, her life, and the lives of many others, would never be the same. If you were in Naomi Ellington's shoes, and the whole flight was looking at you like you didn't belong there, what would you do? Would you take it or would you confront it? Would you have the composure to maintain your dignity during such an insult? What made a calm female CEO the focus of a federal investigation? And why did the CEO of an airline fly to apologize to her in person? We invite you to join this emotional story, to listen, to empathize, and maybe to reflect on yourself. If you find what I'm about to tell meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying us. The cabin lights had just dimmed to that muted golden tone, soft enough to calm people down, bright enough to remind them they were still being watched when the shouting began. It wasn't loud at first, just a rustle, a sudden shift, a few heads turning. Then came the scrape, the sound of a metal wheel hitting the aluminum threshold of the aisle. A sharp, jarring screech that sliced straight through the quiet of the first-class cabin. Duck. Naomi Ellington felt the cold bite of a gloved hand clamp down on her arm. Not guiding, not asking. Pulling. Her back jerked forward before she even understood the motion. The officer's grip tightened too tight for an honest misunderstanding, too forceful for someone who was seated, compliant, and calm. "Ma'am, you need to stand up," one of them said. His voice was flat, tired, the kind of tone used on someone who had already been judged before a word was spoken. Naomi didn't move, not because she refused, but because shock sometimes anchors the body more than fear ever could. "I'm in my assigned seat," she said softly, her voice steady, measured, almost too calm for the moment. But the officer didn't respond. The second one stepped in, bigger, impatient. He grabbed Naomi under the shoulder, fingers digging into the seam of her blazer. She heard the stitch give way before she felt the rip across her back. A gasp escaped from someone in row 3. A muffled, "Oh my God," came from row 4. But no one moved. No one spoke up. They never do, Naomi thought. People freeze when injustice happens too close. They freeze because stepping in makes them part of the story. And most people would rather not be. Her right heel slipped off first, then the left. One shoe bounced lightly against the carpet before rolling onto the seat behind her. Barefoot. Blazer torn. A woman who had spent her entire life earning a place in rooms she was not expected to enter, now being dragged across the aisle of a commercial aircraft like she was a threat? Or worse, like she was invisible. Her body slid awkwardly as the officers pulled her forward. Her shoulder hit the metal armrest. Her knee scraped the carpet. Her briefcase fell open beside her seat, spilling out papers, a tablet, and a small stack of classified evaluation notes she had planned to review for the meeting tomorrow. A meeting that could shift the direction of national security for the next decade. "Please, my bag," she managed, breath uneven as they forced her up the aisle. But the officers didn't slow down. Behind her, passengers watched with a mix of pity, fear, and something Naomi recognized instantly. Relief. Relief that it wasn't them. Near row 4, a young man mid-20s, slim build, hoodie partially zipped, lifted his phone. His hands trembled, but he didn't lower it. His lens followed her, frame steadying as if he suddenly understood this wasn't just a moment. It was evidence. The first-class curtain trembled as the officers pushed through it, dragging Naomi forward. The narrow galley at the front of the aircraft felt colder than the cabin, lit by harsh white LEDs that made every detail sharper. Too sharp. She thought of her mother for a split second, a memory of a kitchen in Atlanta, a warning from childhood. "Baby, the world will look at you and think it knows your worth. Don't let it decide for you. But right now, Her worth was being reduced to whatever accusation the officer had scribbled on a form she hadn't even seen. Naomi wasn't crying. She didn't scream. She didn't thrash or push or fight. She just tried to stay present in her own body because humiliation has a way of splitting a person into pieces. One piece watching, one piece enduring, one piece wanting to disappear. "Watch your step," one officer muttered, not because he cared, but because procedure demanded the illusion of concern. They dragged her onto the jet bridge. The cold air hit her skin, raising goosebumps along her arms. She heard the door close behind them with a pneumatic hiss, the sound of finality, of separation, of a line being drawn between her and the life she had lived just 10 minutes earlier. She tried to steady her breath, but a knot tightened in her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Not fear, not shame, something heavier, a quiet, burning disappointment that, after decades of achievement, credibility, and restraint, she could still be reduced to this. A black woman nobody believed. A black woman someone felt entitled to remove. A black woman whose first-class ticket didn't buy her the presumption of belonging. Halfway down the jet bridge, her legs buckled, just slightly, barely noticeable, but enough. "Hey," one officer snapped. "Don't make this harder." She wasn't making anything harder. She was trying to stay human while being treated like she wasn't. Naomi swallowed hard. Her throat ached. Her eyes stayed dry. Her mind flickered between sharp clarity and a strange fog, something between anger and disbelief, between endurance and exhaustion. In the distance, the faint hum of the terminal echoed. A gate announcement sounded. A baby cried somewhere, life going on casually, indifferently, as she was being dragged out of hers. She didn't know who filmed it. She didn't know where her bag was. She didn't know what justification would be written in a report. But she knew one thing, with a clarity that cut cleaner than the pain in her shoulder. This moment would not end here, not tonight, not like this. And none of the people dragging her, none of the people watching her, had any idea who Dr. Naomi Ellington really was, long after the jet bridge door closed behind her. The coldness of the metal still pressed against Naomi Ellington's skin, as if refusing to let go. The numbness followed her through every step the officers forced her to take. It lingered even after they shut her inside the security room and left her alone. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed before she was released from that small concrete box. By the time she stepped out into the terminal, the crowds had thinned. The fluorescent lights hummed above her in a steady drone. Naomi walked slowly. Blazer torn, one shoe missing, hair slightly loosened from the struggle. There was a quiet heaviness around her, but nothing in the way she held herself suggested defeat. She straightened her back. Even in this disheveled state, there was something unmistakably composed in her posture. She moved through the terminal with a deliberate calm, passing by travelers who stared for a moment, then pretended not to see. Naomi had grown used to that rhythm of silence throughout her life. People never looked long enough to understand, never long enough to ask, but just enough to judge. She paused near a row of benches. The glass wall beside her framed the tarmac outside, where lights from grounded aircraft blinked faintly. A tractor moved bags in slow circles. The scene felt distant, as if she were watching a part of the world she no longer belonged to. Her throat tightened, not from shame, from exhaustion. This trip to Washington wasn't just another flight. It was the final step in a mandate she had carried for months. She was meant to present her security risk evaluation to a federal committee in the morning. An evaluation tied to Oracle Shield, the largest defense technology initiative in decades. Now the meeting hung by a thread. A soft vibration from her pocket broke the haze. She pulled out her phone with careful hands. The screen lit up with a familiar name. Marcus Hale, her lawyer, her anchor when the world slipped into chaos. She hesitated only a moment before accepting the call. "Naomi." His voice came through steady and warm. "Where are you right now in the terminal?" she replied. "Gate C-17. They let me go without charges. I'm on my way," Marcus said. 10 minutes. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment. taking in the reassurance. "All right," she whispered. She ended the call. The phone felt heavier than usual. Instinctively, she opened her email app, searching for something grounding. The top message was from the Department of Defense. She had received it just before boarding, a kind reminder from the committee chair, confirming her presentation schedule. She reread the first sentence twice. "Dr. Ellington, we look forward to your final assessment." Her chest tightened again. She had built her credibility over 20 years of work, research, and an iron-willed commitment to protecting the nation's digital infrastructure. This project wasn't simply a contract. It was the culmination of all the late nights, all the sacrifices, all the times she pushed through barriers placed in her way. Being dragged off a plane wasn't just humiliation. It was a threat to everything she worked for. Her thoughts drifted back to Boston for a moment. The image of her quiet apartment came into focus. The walls lined with books, her small collection of antique record players, a kitchen full of healthy leftovers she always meant to eat but rarely remembered. Her life was simple, understated, a life she preserved to keep her mind sharp. She often woke early to jog along the Charles River before sunrise. The rhythm kept her grounded. It helped her think, helped her breathe. But lately, the pressure of the Oracle Shield audit had stolen much of that calm. Meetings stacked on top of meetings, calls from Washington at inconvenient hours, sleepless nights reviewing intel, analyzing vulnerabilities, drafting risk mitigation models. She accepted it all because work was the one place where her merit spoke louder than her appearance. At least that was what she had believed. A group of flight attendants passed by her seat. Their chatter drifted for a second before fading again. Naomi studied their uniforms, their badges, the little greeting pins glinting against their collars. One of the women noticed her torn blazer, the stocking runs on her legs, the absence of shoes. She looked like she wanted to ask something, maybe offer help. But she kept walking. The silence returned. Naomi let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She remembered a moment from years ago when she was fresh out of graduate school. She had applied for a senior analyst role at a cybersecurity firm. Despite her qualifications, the hiring manager suggested a junior position instead, saying it would fit her background better. She had smiled politely, thanked him, and walked out of the building. 2 months later, she was hired by a government research lab instead, where her first project caught the attention of senior defense officials. She had risen through every obstacle since, every barrier, every misjudgment, every quiet dismissal. Her strength had never been loud. It was subtle, unshakable, the kind that grew from surviving a lifetime of underestimation. A sudden wave of fatigue hit her. The weight of the evening pressed against her shoulders. She leaned back against the cold glass behind her. She didn't want to cry. She rarely cried. But something inside her trembled at the edges. A man approached her then, moving cautiously. His hair was salt and pepper, and he wore a long wool coat. He carried her missing shoe. "Is this yours?" he asked softly. Naomi blinked. She nodded. He extended it with both hands, as if giving her something sacred. She took it gently. "Thank you," she said. He looked at her for another second. Empathy flickered in his eyes before he lowered them. "I'm sorry for what happened," he murmured. "Nobody deserves that." Naomi's throat tightened again. "Thank you," she repeated, barely above a whisper. He walked away quietly. His footsteps faded into the hum of the terminal. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Marcus. Outside. Turn right from the gate. She pushed herself up slowly, gathering the remnants of her dignity as carefully as she gathered her torn blazer. Each step pulsed through her legs with a dull ache, yet she kept moving forward. The automatic doors parted, and a gust of air brushed across her face. Marcus stood near a column, tall and steady in his suit, watching her with concern that he didn't attempt to hide. When she reached him, he placed a warm hand on her shoulder, guiding her gently toward the exit. "We'll talk in the car," he said softly. "There's something you need to see." She nodded, allowing herself to lean into a moment of safety. She didn't know what Marcus had discovered. She didn't know how big this was going to become. But she sensed it. Something about the officer's urgency. Something about Daniel's hostility. Something about the way Victoria Langford had looked at her. Like Naomi's presence had disrupted more than just a seating arrangement. Pieces of the evening pressed together in her mind, forming a shape she couldn't yet name. Not fully, not clearly. A shape that felt dangerous. Naomi followed Marcus out into the quiet night, unaware that the video recorded on that plane was already spreading across the country. Unaware that millions of people would soon see her face, her torn blazer, her bare feet. Unaware that this moment, humiliating as it was, would change more lives than her own. She only knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. The ride from the terminal to the hotel took less than 15 minutes, but Naomi felt each moment stretch in a strange way, like time itself had been thinned. Outside the window, streetlights flickered past in soft patterns, casting faint amber lines across her face. She sat quietly beside Marcus Hale, letting the silence settle around them while her mind drifted, unanchored. The car turned into the circular driveway of an airport hotel, a familiar place for travelers who lived between cities, between obligations, between the demands of people who always wanted something. The automatic glass doors opened as they stepped inside, releasing a mild scent of carpet cleaner and coffee grounds. Marcus guided her to a small lounge off the lobby, somewhere away from foot traffic. He waited until she sat down before speaking. His expression held caution, but also a kind of gentle resolve. "Naomi, I need to tell you something," he said. She folded her hands together, resting them on her lap. "Go ahead." Marcus took out his phone, scrolled through something, then paused. "Before I came to pick you up, I got a call from someone inside the DoD. A quiet call?" His voice lowered. "Your name came up. Not because of the incident on the plane. Not yet. But because your briefcase was flagged in the security logs?" Naomi's breath caught. "Flagged how after they removed you from the aircraft? Someone reported your briefcase as abandoned. Protocol required it to be scanned. During that scan, the system detected attempts to access the encrypted drive." Naomi closed her eyes. For a moment, she felt the tightness move through her chest again. A slow, deliberate pressure that made it hard to breathe evenly. She whispered, "Did they get through?" Marcus shook his head. "No. Your encryption held, but someone tried." The room seemed to grow still. She could hear the faint hum of a vending machine in the hallway, and the quiet, muffled footsteps of a guest somewhere beyond the corner. She murmured, "This wasn't random." "That's what I'm starting to think," Marcus replied. "I don't have proof yet, but I'll find some." Naomi leaned back, letting her head rest against the cushioned seat. Her thoughts drifted back to the first-class lounge at JFK. The space had been calm, almost too calm. A haven of soft chairs, uniformed attendants, and a spread of fruit bowls and coffee carafes arranged with delicate symmetry. She recalled how she sat near the window, reviewing her notes on Oracle Shield. The pages filled with risk assessments, security flaws, and compliance recommendations. PowerPoints, data models, incident logs, information that could shift the fate of the country if placed in the wrong hands. She remembered the faint hum of voices around her. Business travelers murmuring into phones, a couple debating hotel reservations, a man reading financial news on a tablet. She had felt eyes on her, a subtle awareness that followed her like a shadow. Not necessarily malicious, but curious in a way that wasn't entirely comfortable. Naomi had grown used to that feeling too. People often assumed she didn't fit into the world she occupied. They questioned quietly, sometimes openly. Her success didn't shield her from that scrutiny. Marcus watched her, recognizing the distant look on her face. "You okay, Naomi?" Breathed slowly. "I was thinking about the lounge earlier. There was a woman sitting across from me. Older, expensive suit, the type who carries her privilege like it's custom tailored. She kept staring. Not long enough to be overt, but long enough for me to feel it." "You think she mattered?" Naomi hesitated. "I don't know." Her gaze drifted to the window. Beyond it, She could see the faint outline of the runways in the distance, dotted with lights. A plane lifted into the air, its engines roaring softly across the night sky. I knew this project would draw attention, she said after a moment. But I thought the threats would come digitally, not physically. Marcus leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. Whoever did this made mistakes. I'll find their trail. But first, you need rest. Naomi nodded, though she remained still, mind deep in thought. She thought of her company, Ellington Secure Systems, a firm she built from the ground up, staffed by analysts and engineers she trusted. They believed in her. They believed in the work they were doing. And now she wondered if she had unknowingly put them in harm's way simply by accepting the Oracle Shield audit. Her phone vibrated. A text message. She opened it. The sender was unknown. It contained only a link. Marcus noticed. Don't open that. Naomi nodded. I wasn't going to. He reached out, gently placing his hand over hers. We'll handle this step by step. She gave a faint smile. I know. Another memory rose unexpectedly. A small moment earlier that day, she had been sipping her coffee in the lounge when a staff member named Jenna approached to collect empty cups. Jenna had paused briefly, offering a shy smile and asking if Naomi needed anything. Naomi remembered thanking her, and Jenna's expression softening, as if grateful for a simple moment of kindness. It was a tiny detail, yet somehow it floated to the surface now. Maybe because Naomi longed for something human and gentle after the brutality she endured? She let herself sit in silence for a while. Her body still ached from the officer's grip. Her shoulder throbbed faintly in a way she would feel more intensely tomorrow. But pain was not what consumed her. It was the question. Why she whispered it aloud before realizing the word had left her lips. Marcus heard, "We'll find the answer." A quiet knock sounded at the doorway of the lounge. A hotel staff member peeked in, his expression respectfully cautious. Ms. Ellington, your room is ready. Naomi thanked him and stood. She gathered what remained of her dignity, adjusting her torn blazer. The fabric tugged slightly against her back, reminding her of the moment it ripped. Marcus walked with her to the elevator, not leaving her side. When they reached her floor, he paused. Try to rest. I'll check in later. She nodded, offering a quiet thank you before entering her room. The door closed softly. Naomi stood in the stillness, letting the quiet wrap around her. She removed her blazer, folding it carefully despite the tear. She sat at the foot of the bed, hands resting on her knees. For a long moment, she simply breathed. Her life had always been a careful balance between strength and restraint, between brilliance and humility, between the expectations of others and the quiet truth of who she was. Tonight, that balance wavered, but it did not break. Naomi lifted her head, eyes steady, and whispered to herself a promise she had made long ago, a promise her mother taught her before the world tried to reshape her. You hold your ground, Naomi, even when they try to lift you off it. When she finally lay back, the room was dim, the air cool, and her thoughts still heavy. But beneath everything, she felt a small ember of clarity rising. Something was wrong. Something big. And this was only the beginning. Naomi woke from a shallow rest in her hotel room with a quiet ache beneath her ribs, an ache that wasn't from bruises or the way her shoulder had been twisted. It was the ache of memory returning before she could fully brace against it. She sat on the edge of the mattress, hands resting loosely on her thighs, letting the stillness settle before she reached for her phone. Marcus had left a brief message. I'll meet you in the lobby. She placed the device face down for a moment, letting herself breathe in the quiet air. The room smelled faintly of detergent and something citrus. It grounded her enough to stand and make her way toward the elevator. When she reached the lobby, she found Marcus waiting near one of the tall potted plants. His tie was slightly loosened, and he carried the tension of a man who hadn't allowed himself to stop thinking since the night began. He gave her a small nod as she approached. Ready? He asked gently. Naomi nodded. They stepped out through the revolving doors and crossed the drop-off lane back toward the shuttle area where a transportation van waited to take them to the terminal. The sky above them was a muted gray. The air felt heavy, though the forecast had predicted clear conditions. Inside the van, Naomi leaned her head back and allowed the hum of the engine to carry her thoughts backward, to the moment when everything started in the most ordinary way. She had arrived at the airport early, her carry-on rolling behind her with a soft rhythm. The line for first-class check-in was short. A couple ahead of her talked quietly about a conference in San Diego. A family shuffled passports near the kiosk. Nothing unusual. When she reached the counter, the agent greeted her with a polite smile, clicking through her reservation. Naomi remembered appreciating the kindness. The woman printed a boarding pass and handed it over. Gate B42, the agent said. You'll be in 2A. Enjoy the flight. Naomi had smiled back. Thank you. She walked toward security, passing the familiar mosaic floor tile near the checkpoint. She had flown from JFK dozens of times, always noticing the same small details without meaning to the silver frame of a promotional poster, the low rumble of distant announcements, the way travelers touched their pockets or bags to confirm their belongings. After clearing security, she made her way to the first-class lounge. That space had always felt strangely tranquil, almost as if sound moved differently inside it. The walls muted everything to a gentle hush. The chairs were arranged in clusters, and the tall windows displayed the airfield like a moving painting. Naomi settled into a corner seat. She took out her folder and tablet, reviewing the key points she needed to present in Washington. Her handwriting filled the margins with notes she had written long before boarding. Her mind worked naturally in layers, seeing problems from angles most people didn't expect. It was one of the reasons the government trusted her. She understood patterns behind the surface of things. She remembered pouring herself a cup of black coffee. As she stirred it, she felt someone's eyes linger on her. She looked up briefly. A woman, immaculate in a pale lavender suit, sat across the lounge area. Her gaze didn't slide away quickly like most people's. It held for just a moment longer than politeness allowed. Her expression didn't shift. No smile. No warmth. Only something unreadable. Naomi chose not to read into it. Or rather, she let herself ignore the instinct that nudged at her. She returned to her notes, though she caught sight of the woman's reflection in the window. The woman didn't look away. Jenna Brooks, the lounge staff member, approached Naomi later to remove empty glasses from a nearby table. She offered Naomi a shy smile. "Let me know if you need anything," Jenna had said. Naomi replied kindly, "Thank you." A simple exchange, yet meaningful in its gentleness. Moments like that reminded her that small kindness often stood out more than grand gestures. An announcement soon echoed faintly North Star Airways. Flight 2184 to Washington will begin pre-boarding shortly at Gate B42. Naomi gathered her documents. She closed her folder and placed it in the briefcase with practiced precision. Her routine was methodical, predictable. It helped her maintain control in chaotic environments. When she arrived at the gate, the boarding area was already filling. Passengers formed loose clusters around the stanchions. A group of business travelers checked their watches. A toddler clung to her mother's leg while her father folded a stroller nearby. Naomi glanced at the gate number, then joined the first-class line. This was where the tone shifted. The gate agent, a woman with neat hair pulled back into a bun and a badge that read, Sherry Collins, scanned each passenger's pass with a practiced flick of her wrist. When Naomi stepped forward, Sherry's expression cooled almost imperceptibly. "Excuse me," Sherry said, eyebrows lifting. "This is first class." Naomi felt the familiar sting, soft, but unmistakable, as if the words carried a question beneath them. As if Sherry assumed Naomi could not possibly be in the right place. She kept her tone gentle. "Yes, here is my boarding pass." Sherry took it, barely glancing at the print. Her eyes flickered over the seat number, paused at the designation, and then returned to Naomi's face. Something in her posture stiffened. "You sure this is yours?" Sherry asked lightly. almost as if trying to disguise the suspicion beneath it. Naomi held the woman's gaze, not with defiance, but with the steadiness she had learned to master over years of moments like this. "It is," she said calmly. Sherry hesitated, then scanned the pass. The machine emitted a clear chime of approval. Naomi stepped past the podium, though she sensed Sherry's gaze follow her long after she walked down the jet bridge. Marcus's voice brought her back to the present. Thinking about the gate, he asked. Naomi exhaled slowly. "Yes." "That's where it started," Marcus said. "It started the moment she looked at me," Naomi replied softly. "The assumption happened before I even opened my mouth." Marcus nodded. "Those assumptions always come before facts." Naomi gave a faint, tired smile. "Story of my life." They arrived back at the terminal. The shuttle doors slid open, revealing the familiar stretch of polished floor and soft echo of rolling suitcases. Naomi stepped inside, feeling the weight of memory settle more firmly. She walked a little slower this time, absorbing each detail: the mosaic tiles, the overhead lamps, the subtle scent of coffee drifting from a nearby kiosk. It was strange how ordinary spaces could hold the heaviest moments. At gate B42, she paused. The crowd from earlier was gone. A new group waited for another flight, unaware of what had transpired only hours earlier. Sherry Collins wasn't at the podium. A different agent stood there now, sorting boarding passes. Naomi stared at the empty space near the rope line. She could almost see her past self standing there, holding her briefcase, unaware of the storm waiting behind the curtain of assumed hospitality. Marcus watched her carefully. "You don't have to look at this." "Yes," she murmured. "I do." She took a long, steady breath, letting the memory unfold fully. The suspicion in Sherry's eyes, the sting of humiliation that followed her onto the plane. The moment she sat in 2A and felt the air shift behind her, the way Victoria Langford's voice had pierced the quiet with a certainty that wasn't earned. This was the seed of everything. Something small, something subtle, something that could have been corrected with one simple act of fairness. But it wasn't. And that choice had set everything in motion, Naomi whispered, almost to herself. It's incredible how quickly a life can tilt. Marcus placed a hand on her arm. "This isn't on you." Naomi didn't answer. She looked at the gate one last time, then turned away. She didn't want pity. She didn't want rage. She only wanted truth. And she was getting closer. The memory of gate B42 lingered around Naomi long after she stepped away from it. The air in that corner of the terminal carried a faint bitterness she could almost taste, as if the space itself remembered the moment Sherry Collins first questioned her place in line. Marcus walked beside her in silence while she gathered her thoughts. He knew better than to interrupt. With every step, the tension in her shoulders eased only a little, but the heaviness in her mind refused to lift. By the time they reached the quieter end of the concourse, Naomi stopped near a wide pane of glass facing the airfield. She stood there, watching a plane taxi across the runway, its lights gliding across the pavement like thin strokes of paint. She allowed the motion to settle her thoughts, then spoke. "I want to go back through the boarding in my mind." She said, every detail. Marcus nodded. "Take your time." Naomi took a slow breath. "I stepped onto the jet bridge right after that exchange with Sherry." She said, "I remember feeling watched even before I entered the cabin." She paused, recalling the scene in pieces. The man in front of me nodded politely. The woman behind me flicked her eyes across my clothes, and then looked away. Nothing unusual, nothing loud. Just the small things people do when they think they're subtle. She swallowed, the memory sharp around the edges. When I turned the corner into first class, I saw Daniel standing at the front of the cabin. His posture changed the moment he saw me. It wasn't professional attention either, and it was something else. "What kind of something else?" Marcus asked, like he had already decided I didn't belong there. Naomi said, "Not because of my status, because of something he thought he saw." She remembered the look distinctly, a tightening around his mouth, a slight tilt of his chin. expressions so faint that anyone else might have missed them. But Naomi had been reading such expressions her whole life. I nodded at him. She continued. He didn't nod back. Instead, he asked for my boarding pass, even though he hadn't asked the man who walked in ahead of me. Marcus exhaled quietly. That tracks with everything we've pieced together. She didn't answer. The memory pressed forward on its own. I showed him my phone. He scanned it without looking me in the eye. Then he leaned toward the galley and whispered something to another attendant. They both looked in my direction. Marcus frowned. He called backup before anything even happened. I think so, Naomi replied. He wasn't responding to an issue. He was preparing for one. Her pulse quickened slightly, even in recalling it. She clasped her hands together to steady herself. I walked to my seat. What I remember most was the quiet. The cabin had that soft hush, the kind that wraps around you like a blanket. You're supposed to feel safe there. Settled. She shook her head slowly, but I didn't. She saw it again in her mind, the gleaming storage compartments, the wide leather seats, the overhead lights forming narrow halos over each row, a space meant for comfort, a space where she had been made to feel unwelcome long before anyone touched her. I placed my briefcase under the seat in front of me. I arranged my folder and a bottle of water. I tried to relax my shoulders, to shift into work mode. Naomi paused for a moment, and that's when she appeared. Victoria Langford? Marcus said. Yes. Naomi's voice lowered. She stood there, close enough to cast a shadow over me. Her stance was rigid, chin lifted. She looked at me as though I'd taken something from her. What was the first thing she said? Marcus asked. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask a question. Naomi's jaw tightened. She just said, "You're in my seat." No room for uncertainty. No hesitation. As if the matter was already settled. And you responded. I told her it was 2A and that the boarding pass on my phone matched the seat. I kept my tone neutral, and she escalated immediately. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. She raised her voice, said the seat was hers, said I was refusing to move. A crease of frustration appeared on Marcus's forehead. Classic tactic. Force the situation. Naomi nodded. She made sure others heard her version first. She wanted witnesses before the truth could surface. Her voice softened. People looked up from their screens. Eyes flicked toward us. Some passengers frowned at me before I even had time to explain myself. That's how fast assumptions spread. What about Daniel? Marcus asked. He appeared behind her. Naomi's expression darkened slightly, almost as if he had been waiting for her cue. He didn't ask questions, and we didn't check anything. He sounded almost relieved when she claimed I was in the wrong seat. Marcus leaned back in his chair. It was staged. It felt rehearsed. Naomi admitted quietly. Their rhythm was too aligned, too quick. And neither of them addressed me by name even once. Because they weren't speaking to you, Marcus said. They were speaking at you. Naomi's breath grew heavier. She let it settle, then continued. He told me to move. I told him again that it was my seat. I held my phone up. The text was right there. Reservation confirmed. My name. My status. Everything. And he ignored it. Marcus said he barely glanced at it. Naomi's eyes sharpened. He turned back to Victoria as if her comfort mattered more than the truth in front of him. Her voice thinned slightly. He accused me of creating a disturbance. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't lifted a hand. I only asked him to scan both passes and verify. Marcus pressed a hand to his forehead. And that's when he called security. Not yet. Naomi replied. First, he told me he wouldn't allow any trouble in his cabin. She remembered the word exactly. Trouble. A word often placed on people who had done nothing to deserve it. After that, he walked down the aisle, Naomi said softly. I remember the swish of his uniform fabric. I I remember the nervous shifting of a passenger's feet nearby. I remember Victoria stepping into the aisle seat, looking at me like she'd already won something. An ironic breath left her. She had that small smile. Not joy. Satisfaction. Naomi paused, letting the emotional weight settle rather than rush past it. When the officers arrived, I still believed reason would prevail, she said. I thought if I explained everything clearly, they would check the system. But they didn't listen. And Victoria played her part so well. You stayed calm, Marcus said. I had to, Naomi whispered. People like me don't get the luxury of anger. The quiet between them deepened. Naomi looked out the terminal window again, watching another aircraft lift into the air. Its ascent felt symbolic. A reminder that every flight had a moment where it broke free from the pull of the earth. She didn't feel free yet. Not even close. But something in her posture shifted slightly, as if she were preparing for her own ascent. Marcus, she murmured. None of this started on that plane. That moment was only the spark. You're right, he said. And we're about to learn who struck the match. A distant boarding announcement echoed through the concourse. Naomi's gaze remained steady, her voice steadying with it. I want the truth, she said. All of it. Marcus nodded. We'll get it. Naomi knew she wasn't standing in the past anymore. She was stepping towards something larger, and the more she looked back at the chain of events, the more clearly she saw a pattern emerging. Something orchestrated, something deliberate, something with reach far beyond a single aircraft cabin, something that wanted her off that flight for a reason. The hotel corridor outside Naomi's room felt unusually still when she stepped out again. She had taken a moment to gather herself, to let her breathing slow and her mind quiet enough for clarity to return. Marcus waited near the elevator with the same solemn concern he carried since the night she was dragged from the plane. He gave her a small nod, then gestured toward the lobby. Before we talk about anything else, he said, you need to see something. Naomi didn't ask what it was. The tone in his voice already told her it mattered. They walked through the lobby together. A few travelers lingered near the lounge seats, scrolling through their phones or sipping from paper cups. None of them looked at Naomi, but she felt a subtle shift in the air, as if the world outside the hotel had changed while she rested. Marcus stopped by a quiet corner and pulled out his phone. He took a breath before turning the screen toward her. The thumbnail image showed her face the exact moment the officers had gripped her arms in the aisle of the plane. The angle was slightly tilted, the lighting harsh, but the emotion was unmistakable. Shock, pain, disbelief. The video had a caption: North Star Airways drags black CEO from her assigned seat after false complaint. Naomi's stomach tightened. She touched the screen gently, almost afraid. The moment the clip began to play, her breath caught. She heard her own voice again. Calm at first, explaining, requesting verification. Then the shift. The officer's commands, the sound of fabric tearing, a passenger's hushed gasp, the scrape of her shoe as it fell. Alex Rivera had captured everything. The clip ended with a freeze frame of her being pulled toward the jet bridge, her hair slightly disheveled, her briefcase scattered across the aisle. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of it. How many views, she asked quietly. Marcus hesitated before answering. 7 million in the first hour? It's climbing faster than anything I've ever seen. She felt her pulse thrum beneath her skin. People are furious, he continued. Comments, shares, news outlets reposting clips, advocacy groups tagging the airline. The story exploded the moment the video went live. Naomi lowered her gaze. She wasn't someone who sought attention. If anything, she'd built her entire career on diligence without spectacle. But now her face was on every screen, placed into a narrative she had not chosen. Do they know my name? She whispered. Not officially, Marcus said. Alex blurred your ID on purpose. Smart kid. But some viewers recognized you. Your picture from a Forbes profile is circulating. Naomi let out a long, controlled breath. She wasn't sure if she felt exposed or protected. Maybe a little of both. Marcus swiped to the next screen, showing dozens of posts stacked on top of one another. He read a few out loud. They dragged a woman with a valid ticket. This is outrageous. No one should be treated like this. North Star needs to answer for what happened. Naomi absorbed the words without reacting. Anger, sympathy, disbelief, it was all there, swirling through thousands of voices. But behind the uproar, she sensed something else, too. A current deeper than simple outrage. Look at this one, Marcus said softly. Another post filled the screen. Someone had slowed the video down to frame-by-frame detail, pointing out how Victoria Langford watched the scene without remorse, her posture composed, her expression almost triumphant. The caption read, "Why is this woman so calm while the chaos unfolds?" More comments followed. She knew what she was doing. This wasn't random. Check her background. Something feels planned. A quiet tremor passed through Naomi's chest. Even strangers felt the same instinct she had tried to dismiss, that nothing about the confrontation felt spontaneous. Marcus looked at her. People are starting to connect dots. They don't know what those dots are yet, but they sense something. Naomi's voice came out low. They're right. A group of travelers passed by them, their footsteps tapping softly across the tile. None seemed to recognize her, yet the growing buzz of the outside world pressed closer with every minute. Naomi gently handed Marcus back the phone. Public attention doesn't guarantee justice, she said. It can turn into noise, it can... He agreed. But this isn't fading. It's gaining momentum. He paused for a moment, reading her expression. You're not alone in this. Naomi... She nodded, though the knot in her chest remained. The sight of her own face in the video had reopened the wound she'd tried to control. Seeing herself dragged, hearing the disbelief in her voice, it pressed against places she rarely allowed to surface. Marcus stepped closer. Talk to me, he said quietly. Naomi looked down at her hands. They had always been steady, precise, able to decode encryption failures and trace cyber intrusions with a kind of quiet mastery. Yet, as she examined them now, she saw faint tremors born not from fear but from fatigue and the weight of humiliation. When they pulled me, she said softly, something in me split. I've lived through bias, through insults, through systems not made for me. But this... Her voice wavered slightly. This was different. They tried to make me invisible in a place where I had every right to stand. Marcus's eyes softened. You didn't break, he whispered. You endured. Naomi swallowed. Enduring is not the same as being okay. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet in the corner of the lobby wrapped around them like a thin veil. Finally, Marcus exhaled and opened a new window on his phone. A list of news headlines appeared. Chief Ethics Advisor forcibly removed from first-class seat. North Star Airways accused of discrimination in viral video. Civil rights groups demand investigation into airport officers. Naomi stared at the words, feeling the gravity settle into her bones. This is bigger than you now, Marcus said, and it's only the beginning. Naomi lifted her gaze. There was a steadiness in her eyes again, a quiet fire that had dimmed earlier but now returned. Then we follow the truth, she said. No matter how deep it goes. Marcus nodded. Agreed. He glanced toward the entrance of the hotel. I've arranged a car to take us to a private meeting room. A colleague wants to speak to you. He has security footage from the gate. Naomi's heart tightened. The gate. The moment that seemed small at first but now felt like the first fracture in the surface of something much larger. Let's go, she said. They walked toward the door, each step pulsing with the quiet certainty that the storm was not just outside, it was already here. And now, instead of being dragged, Naomi would choose her direction herself. The air outside felt charged as the car pulled up. Naomi stepped inside, She was no longer just the woman pulled from her seat. She was becoming the woman who would expose why. The ride to the private office felt quieter than the earlier drive. Naomi watched the city pass in soft motion through the tinted window, lights stretching into lines that faded almost as quickly as they appeared. Marcus sat beside her, steadily reviewing something on his phone, though she sensed his attention was divided. He kept glancing at her, checking for signs she might not want to admit. She wasn't fragile. She was simply tired of being forced to prove it. When the car slowed to a stop near a discreet glass building tucked off a less-traveled road, Naomi inhaled deeply. The structure had no signs, no welcoming banners, just a series of reflective panels that hid everything inside. Marcus guided her toward the entrance, his pace measured and thoughtful. Inside, a security guard nodded to Marcus. No questions asked. They crossed a short hallway and entered a conference room where a single man waited at the far end of the table. His posture was straight, his expression composed, and he had the kind of presence that suggested years of navigating high-pressure environments. "This is Samuel Carter," Marcus said, "former airport investigations lead. Now he works independently." Samuel gave Naomi a respectful nod. "Dr. Ellington, it's an honor to meet you. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances." "Thank you," she replied softly. "May I sit?" she asked, though her tone made it clear she intended to keep some control over the moment. "Please," Samuel said. Naomi lowered herself into the chair, placing her hands on the polished table. The surface felt cool beneath her palms, grounding her. Samuel tapped a button on a small remote. The overhead screen flickered to life, showing the time-stamped security footage from Gate B42. Naomi felt her throat tighten as she watched herself approach the counter, unaware of the storm waiting to unfold. The footage showed Sherry Collins glancing toward the first-class line repeatedly before Naomi even stepped forward. Her behavior looked restless, as if she anticipated something. Another angle showed Daniel Morris pacing briefly near the cabin entrance half an hour before boarding began. He checked his watch twice, then leaned toward the galley to whisper something. "I didn't focus on these details until the video went viral," Samuel said, voice calm. "When Marcus called me, I reviewed the logs with a sharper lens." Naomi watched closely, eyes narrowing with each new angle. "Look at this," Samuel continued. He paused the footage where a woman in a pale lavender suit stood by the lounge entrance, phone pressed to her ear. She glanced toward Naomi more than once before walking away with a controlled stride. The screen zoomed slightly. Her face was unmistakable. Victoria Langford. Naomi felt her breath still. "She arrived an hour before you checked in." Samuel said she didn't enter the lounge. "She waited by the entrance, made several calls, then walked toward the gate less than 3 minutes before you did." Marcus leaned forward. "Did you pull her call logs?" Samuel shook his head. "Not without a warrant, but I checked movement records. She walked the same path as you, at a slower pace, always staying close enough to keep you in sight." Naomi stared at the frozen frame. Victoria's expression was neutral, almost calculated. She wasn't reacting to anything. She was watching. "What about Daniel?" Naomi asked. Samuel clicked to another clip. Daniel standing near the cabin door again, this time talking to someone on his phone. The audio didn't exist, but his face told a story in its own right. He made 3 outgoing calls in the 30 minutes before boarding. Samuel said none of them were to North Star's internal line. Naomi felt a slow, cold realization spread through her. "Who did he call?" Marcus asked. "A number registered in Maryland." Samuel replied, "Encrypted, not government issued." Marcus and Naomi exchanged a glance. "Someone wanted her off that flight," Marcus said quietly. Samuel nodded, "and they counted on bias to do the heavy lifting." Naomi leaned back, letting the truth settle. She remembered the rigidity in Victoria's voice, the calculated panic she stirred. She remembered the way Daniel's demeanor changed the second she raised her voice. And now, watching them move in sync before she even arrived at the gate, the pieces finally aligned. "This wasn't just prejudice," Naomi murmured. This was a coordinated effort. Samuel folded his hands. Based on the footage and timing, I'd say yes. The words hung in the air, dense and impossible to ignore. Naomi stared at the screen again. She watched herself stand calmly at the podium, unaware of the whispered conversations happening out of frame. She remembered the weight of that moment, the freezing exchange, the tightening in her chest not from humiliation but from something deeper, the quiet awareness of danger she hadn't yet named. She whispered, "Why go through so much effort?" Marcus answered softly. "Because Oracle's shield isn't just a contract. It's leverage, influence, billions in funding. There are companies that would do anything to control it or sabotage it." Naomi closed her eyes briefly. "I always thought the threats would come digitally," she said, "not through people who stare you in the face." "Threats come in many forms," Samuel replied. "The most dangerous ones often hide behind subtlety." The screen continued to show clips from other angles. Naomi walking toward the jet bridge. Daniel's tense posture. Victoria lingering near the entrance of the plane, looking toward the seats with an unsettling stillness. A few frames later, Naomi sitting in 2A. The room went silent. "Pause there," Naomi said. Samuel froze the frame. Naomi studied the posture of everyone around her. The man in 1B flipping through a magazine. The woman across the aisle adjusting her scarf. Victoria clutching her purse tightly. Daniel pretending to arrange meal menus. Everything looked ordinary on the surface, but the stillness carried an undercurrent she hadn't noticed before. "I see it," she whispered. "I feel it now." There was tension in the cabin before I sat down. I sensed it but didn't want to assume. Marcus nodded. "Because you've had to question your instincts your whole life." The truth of that statement stung. Samuel shut off the screen gently. "I can compile a report, but you need more than that. You need official subpoenas, deeper access, and someone higher up to confirm your standing." Naomi looked at Marcus. "Who do we need?" Marcus hesitated before answering. "The CEO of North Star Airways is flying to Washington at this very moment. He said he wants a private meeting with you." Naomi blinked. "The CEO." "Yes," Marcus said. "He saw the backlash. He knows their company is in danger. He wants to apologize, but I think he also wants something else." What? Naomi asked softly. "Answers." Marcus replied, "He wants to know who used his airline for a setup." Naomi felt a mixture of skepticism and resolve rise within her. She had been humiliated, dragged, misjudged. Now she was expected to sit across from the man responsible for the culture that enabled it. She straightened slowly in her chair. "He wants answers," she said quietly. "Then he'll get them. But on my terms." Samuel nodded approvingly. "Good. Because he's not walking into a simple apology. He's walking into the beginning of an exposure." Naomi gathered her calm, letting it settle over her like armor. This time, she would not be dragged anywhere, and she would walk there herself, with purpose, with truth, and with every intention of finding the people who thought she could be removed quietly. The hours that followed the meeting with Samuel Carter felt heavier than the night before. When Naomi and Marcus returned to the hotel, the world outside their car seemed louder, not from noise, but from attention. Every screen they passed glowed with headlines moving in rapid succession. Every corner of the lobby felt tense with murmurs. Every person scrolling through their phone appeared caught in the same tide of outrage. Naomi sensed it the moment she stepped inside the lobby. A man near the couch glanced up at her, then looked away quickly. Two women sitting near the window whispered something behind their hands as she passed. She did not hear the words, but she recognized the tone. Recognition mixed with uncertainty. Marcus stayed close beside her, guiding her through the busy space toward a quieter sitting area. Before they reached it, a hotel employee approached nervously. "Excuse me, Ms. Ellington," the young woman said, voice careful. "I just wanted to tell you that we're all so sorry this happened. People have been talking about it everywhere. It's awful. Naomi offered a gentle nod. She didn't resent the sympathy, though she had not asked for it. Sympathy soothed very little when the wound ran deeper than the moment itself. Thank you, Naomi said softly. The young woman stepped aside, and Naomi continued walking. She felt Marcus watching her, assessing if she was overwhelmed. She wasn't. She was simply absorbing everything, letting each detail shape the quiet resolve building inside her. They reached the private lounge area. Marcus sat across from her, his phone buzzing constantly against the table. I turned off notifications earlier, he said, but the messages keep coming. The video is everywhere now. Politicians are tweeting about it, journalists asking for statements. It's become a national story. Naomi looked at him steadily. Show me. He hesitated for a moment, then handed her the phone. The first headline, civil rights leaders call for federal investigation after CEO dragged from airplane. Another North Star Airways faces historic backlash. Then a third who is Dr. Naomi Ellington. The woman at the center of the viral incident? Naomi paused before reading further. Seeing her own name projected into the chaos felt surreal. She had spent her entire career in rooms where only the most specialized experts knew of her work. She had commanded respect through competence, not visibility. And now the world knew her face before it knew her story. She scrolled down. Photos of her from conferences, award ceremonies, leadership events appeared in a collage. Someone had even found a picture of her giving a keynote address on cybersecurity ethics. The caption beneath it read, "The woman North Star underestimated." Naomi's chest tightened, though she maintained her composure. Marcus leaned closer. There's more. Look at the opinion sections. She opened one article written by a well-known columnist. A nation watched a black woman with credentials beyond reproach get dragged from a seat she paid for. If she can be treated this way, what does that say about the rest of us? Another commentary followed. This incident isn't just about one airline. It reflects a pattern woven into the fabric of our society. Dr. Ellington's calm resistance is already becoming a symbol of something larger. Naomi put the phone down. She needed a moment to breathe. Across the table. Marcus observed her carefully. You're handling this with more grace than most people ever could. I'm handling what I must, she replied. A quiet pause stretched between them. Then Marcus added, the CEO is arriving this evening. They set the meeting location already. He wants to talk privately before making a public statement. Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. He wants to protect the airline, not me. He wants to salvage what he can. Marcus agreed, but he also wants to know who used his employees to create this mess. Naomi's tone lowered, and we need him to know everything, not just what he hopes to hear. Marcus gave a small nod. She leaned back against the chair and allowed the weight of the day to settle. Every hour since the incident felt like a shift in the ground beneath her feet. It wasn't only the brutality of being dragged. It was the echo of something she'd known her entire life, how easily people could rewrite her presence, her intention, her dignity. She whispered, this is bigger than bias. There's coordination, there's motive, and someone thinks I'm just collateral. Marcus folded his hands. They underestimated the wrong woman. Naomi lifted her gaze toward the window. Cars passed steadily outside, their reflections flickering against the glass. She felt an ache rise inside her, not from bruises, but from the emotional weight pressing into her chest. I worked my entire life for a seat at every table they said I couldn't reach, she said quietly. Now that I'm finally in those rooms, someone is trying to push me out. Not because I failed, but because I succeeded. Her words carried a quiet power, one shaped by endurance, not ego. Marcus nodded. They thought you would disappear quietly. They didn't consider who you are. Before Naomi could respond, her phone vibrated again. This time, the alert came from a news network she recognized. Marcus leaned in as she opened it. A reporter spoke directly into the camera. Behind her, a graphic displayed a split-screen image of Naomi and the North Star logo. This story has sparked a national conversation. The reporter said, activist groups are planning a demonstration outside North Star headquarters. Federal agencies may be considering a review of the airline's conduct. Meanwhile, sources confirm that Dr. Ellington was scheduled to present a high-level federal assessment tied to the Oracle Shield program, raising serious concerns about whether her removal from the flight was coincidental or intentional. Naomi's pulse slowed to a deep, steady thrum. They're starting to connect the dots, Marcus said. Naomi closed the notification and placed the phone down deliberately. We need to stay ahead of this, she said. Once the CEO arrives, he's going to want control of the narrative. And we won't let him have it, Marcus assured her. Another moment passed. Softer this time. Naomi felt her shoulders drop slightly, a quiet release of pressure. She was not broken. She was not defeated. But she was undeniably shaken in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. Marcus spoke gently. How are you holding up? She hesitated before answering. I feel like I'm standing in a room filled with noise. Everyone is speaking about me. No one is speaking to me. It's disorienting. Marcus gave her a sympathetic nod. It's natural. This kind of attention hits harder than the incident itself. Naomi met his eyes. I didn't ask to be a symbol. No, Marcus said softly. But right now, you are one. And that gives you power. She thought about that for a moment. The idea of power resting not in her title, her intellect, or her achievements, but in the injustice she endured. It felt strange, heavy, unsettling, yet something inside her shifted, not into anger, into purpose. Then we use it, she said quietly, not to punish blindly, but to reveal truth. Marcus exhaled with relief. That's exactly what we'll do. Naomi stood slowly, grounding herself. Her reflection on the window looked steady again. A woman shaped by resilience and sharpened by adversity. Let's prepare for the meeting tonight, she said. Marcus rose beside her. I'll get everything ready. As they walked back toward the elevator, Naomi felt the world watching her, not as a victim, but as someone who would determine what happened next. She glanced once more at the lobby filled with strangers, all unaware that the woman walking past them carried the first pieces of a puzzle that would soon expose something far larger than a plane incident. This was only the beginning. And now she would no longer move quietly. She would move with intention. The hotel conference suite chosen for the meeting felt intentionally sterile, almost too polished for what was about to unfold. Subtle lighting glowed against the white walls, and the faint hum of the ventilation system carried a low, steady rhythm. Naomi stepped inside ahead of Marcus, letting her eyes adjust to the space. She sensed the tension building quietly beneath her ribs, the kind that arrives when truth is only moments away from revealing itself. Marcus checked his phone again. His card just pulled in. Naomi clasped her hands gently, letting her fingers rest against each other. She was steady, grounded. Yet she felt the weight of the national gaze lingering behind her. The world had shifted in the past several hours, and now she was walking into a conversation that would shape what came next. A soft knock sounded. A hotel staff member cracked the door open. Ms. Ellington, the North Star delegation is here. Delegation. Naomi absorbed the word for a breath. She expected the CEO, but a delegation hinted at something larger. 3 people stepped into the room. First came Richard Hanover, the CEO of North Star Airways, his face lined with fatigue. His silver hair was slightly disheveled, and the weight of the scandal clung to his posture like a heavy coat. Behind him walked his general counsel, a composed man with thin glasses named Everett Shaw. A public relations executive followed, carrying a laptop and a tight, strategic smile. Richard moved toward Naomi with cautious steps. He extended a hand, though it hovered mid-air for a moment, as if uncertain whether she could bear the gesture. Dr. Ellington, he said, voice low. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Naomi offered a polite nod. Mr. Hanover? He lowered his hand slowly, reading the room. Please, Naomi said, motioning toward the table. Have a seat. They settled around the wide surface. A quiet unease washed over the group, filling the silence that followed. Richard folded his hands. Before anything else, I want to apologize. Truly. What happened on Flight 2184 never should have happened. You deserved respect, and instead you were treated inhumanely. I am deeply sorry. His voice cracked, just slightly. Naomi observed him carefully. She felt no satisfaction in his remorse, only a steady curiosity. Your apology acknowledges the treatment, she said softly. But does it acknowledge the cause? Richard blinked. The cause? Marcus leaned forward. Your employees acted with bias, yes, but they also acted with intent. Intent that suggests coordination. Everett Shaw straightened. We haven't seen evidence of coordination. Samuel Carter stepped from the corner where he had been waiting. Richard flinched in surprise. He hadn't expected another person in the room. Mr. Hanover, Samuel said calmly. I reviewed your security logs and internal timestamps. I found patterns, conversations, movements, calls, all pointing toward premeditation. Richard's brows pulled together as he sat back, visibly stunned. This is the first I'm hearing of it. Marcus set a folder on the table. Your cabin attendant, Daniel Morris, made multiple encrypted calls before Dr. Ellington boarded. He also contacted a personal line in Maryland. That number is linked to an entity currently being investigated for corporate interference. Richard glanced sharply at Everett. The legal counsel. Everett looked troubled for the first time. This isn't all, Samuel added. A passenger named Victoria Langford tracked Dr. Ellington's movements at the airport long before boarding. It appeared deliberate. Naomi kept her posture composed, though her heartbeat began a slow tightening. Richard stared at Naomi as if seeing her story differently for the first time. Someone used us, he said quietly. Used my airline. Naomi held his gaze. Someone used your employees. Someone counted on assumptions to do the work. Richard's jaw tightened. Everett clicked open a laptop. If what you're saying is true, North Star is not just facing a PR crisis. We may have been used to interfere with federal matters. Marcus met Everett's eyes. Dr. Ellington was on her way to present her final assessment on Oracle Shield. Her evaluation determines the direction of the most significant cybersecurity program in years. Richard's face went pale. You're part of that project, he asked Naomi. Voice faint? Naomi nodded slowly. I am the lead ethics auditor. Richard leaned back, as if absorbing a blow. The enormity of the situation unfolded across his features. He dropped his gaze for a moment, exhaling deeply. This is more than an apology, he said. This is a disaster. Samuel spoke firmly. Someone manipulated your staff, used their prejudices, and weaponized their authority. The room thickened with tension. Richard rubbed his forehead. I'll cooperate fully. Whatever you need. Naomi's expression remained gentle but unwavering. Cooperation is only the first step. Richard looked up. Tell me what else you want. Naomi paused. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a quiet steel. I want transparency. Every internal record, every communication from your crew, every line of data from gate operations. Richard nodded quickly. Done. I also want accountability. Naomi continued. Not the kind that comes from suspending employees to appease the public. I want meaningful change within your system. Richard swallowed. Of course. Whatever you recommend. And one more thing, Naomi said, her tone softening but not weakening. I want the truth to be public when the investigation is complete. Everett inhaled sharply. That could cripple North Star. Naomi met his gaze steadily. Truth is not an enemy. It's a correction. Richard raised a hand to silence Everett, then turned back to Naomi. If truth destroys us, then we were already broken. For the first time since entering the room, Naomi felt something shift in him, a sincerity deeper than corporate survival, a man facing the collapse of an empire built without the strength to withstand scrutiny. She nodded. Then Richard spoke again. There's something you should know. We reviewed internal alerts from the crew. Someone filed an incident report 3 minutes before your confrontation with Ms. Langford. The report claimed you were acting aggressive in the lounge. That was a lie, obviously, but the timestamp is important. Samuel's attention sharpened. Who filed it? Richard tapped the table in thought, searching for the name. Sherry Collins. Naomi inhaled slowly. A quiet, heavy ache pulled at her chest. Marcus murmured. She planted the seed before anything happened. Richard visibly sagged, as if the betrayal eroded part of his foundation. Naomi felt stillness sweep through her. Not numbness, but clarity. Richard looked at her again. Dr. Ellington, this was an attack. Not just against you, against your work, against your position. Marcus leaned forward, and we intend to expose it. The room fell into a contemplative silence, each person grappling with the gravity of the unfolding truth. Naomi finally spoke. Mr. Hanover, this isn't simply your downfall or mine. This is proof of a deeper sickness in how systems treat people like me. Someone leveraged it, exploited it, and believed it would go unnoticed. Her voice softened. They were wrong. Richard bowed his head. Tell us what to do next. Naomi rose slowly from her seat. She didn't need to raise her voice or command authority. The room shifted around her, as if recognizing the quiet strength she had carried through humiliation, confusion, and rising chaos. We follow every thread, she said gently, and we make sure none of them break. Marcus stood beside her. Samuel closed the laptop. The meeting was no longer an apology session. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The first light coming through the hotel's tall window did not soften the weight of what awaited Naomi. She sat alone at a round table tucked into the corner of the suite, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that had long gone cold. The air inside the room felt unnaturally still, the kind of stillness that settles after a storm but before anyone understands the full damage. Her phone buzzed with a constant rhythm. Notifications, mentions, articles, interviews, hashtags rising in waves she could not escape, no matter how gently she tried to breathe. The world had taken Flight 184 and transformed it into a symbol, naked and raw. She scrolled through a headline. Black CEO forcibly removed from first-class witness videos. Spark national outrage. Another civil rights groups demand federal probe into North Star Airways. And one that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. Dr. Naomi Ellington, the woman who refused to disappear. She set the phone down. A pulse of gratitude flickered through her, mixed with something heavier and more complicated. She never sought this spotlight. She only sought dignity. Yet now half the country was arguing about her name in ways that stripped her into pieces she did not choose. A soft knock sounded. Marcus stepped inside without a word at first. He studied her expression, reading every subtle shift with a familiarity that came from years of partnership. His tie hung a little loose, his hair slightly out of place, as though he had been running. You've seen the news, he said quietly. I've seen enough. He pulled out the chair across from her, lowering himself slowly. His face carried the fatigue of a man fighting several battles simultaneously. The video crossed 200 million views. Naomi closed her eyes for a breath. People are angry and mobilized. Marcus added, civil rights groups are planning demonstrations. 3 federal committees already scheduled emergency hearings. And the plane crew, they're under internal investigation. That part moved fast. Naomi looked toward the window, where the city shimmered with early light. A mixture of relief and sorrow pooled in her chest. Every reaction feels bigger than the truth of that moment. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I only asked to be treated like a human being. Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady, which is exactly why it hit so deeply. People saw someone calm and dignified being treated like a threat. It revealed something that has been too familiar for too long. Naomi lowered her gaze. Familiar doesn't mean easy to carry. Silence hung between them, rich and honest. Before either could speak again, Samuel arrived with a folder tucked under his arm. His steps were brisk, his face sharpened by urgency. He placed the folder on the table and pushed it toward Naomi. "We have a situation," he said. Marcus straightened. "What now?" Samuel opened the folder. More data came in. Richard's team unlocked the onboard communication logs. They found messages from Daniel Morris, and he was texting a number registered in Virginia. That phone belongs to an intermediary for a private contracting firm. Naomi felt a chill move through her. Which firm? Samuel held her gaze. Helios Defense Solutions. Naomi inhaled sharply. They were competing for the cybersecurity wing of Oracle Shield. Marcus muttered a quiet, controlled curse under his breath. So this isn't just sabotage. This is a direct attempt to undermine a federal evaluation process. Samuel nodded once. There's more. Victoria Langford has ties to Helios, financial ties, frequent contacts, and she booked her North Star ticket 3 hours after your travel itinerary was confirmed. Naomi absorbed every word, her heartbeat slowly deepening into her abdomen. It was astonishing how quickly cruelty could disguise itself as coincidence until patterns exposed the truth. So it wasn't just bias, she whispered. It was orchestration. Samuel's tone softened. Someone believed that if they pushed you off that flight, forced you into a defensive position, maybe even caused a minor scandal, it would delay your recommendation long enough for Helios to adjust their proposal. Marcus added, and they assumed the public would blame you. Not the system. Naomi's voice trembled slightly as she asked, "Do we know who coordinated it?" Samuel hesitated. Not fully, but we found a name that keeps appearing. Brock Landon, senior strategist at Helios. Naomi felt something tighten inside. She knew that name. Brock had a reputation for ruthless advancement, someone who measured ethics only in terms of profit margins. Marcus watched her carefully. You crossed paths with him at that cybersecurity summit 2 years ago. Didn't you? Yes, Naomi said softly. He knew what my work meant. He knew what my signature would determine. Samuel looked uneasy. This goes beyond your mistreatment. You were targeted because you hold influence over a project worth billions. They didn't just want your seat. They wanted your voice silenced. Naomi stood slowly, turning toward the window once more. The light outside had shifted, painting a warm glow across the buildings. Yet it did nothing to ease the pressure in her chest. She had endured humiliation, but now she confronted something far more sinister. Behind her, Marcus spoke in a subdued tone. We need to take this federal... Samuel nodded. I've already prepared preliminary filings. The DOJ will need direct testimony. Naomi rested her hands softly on the back of her chair. She spoke with quiet precision. If this becomes a federal case, the backlash will be beyond anything North Star has faced. People will question every decision I've ever made. They will dissect my entire career, Marcus replied. You've handled storms before. This one is different, Naomi murmured. This is about who I am and what I represent. Her eyes glistened for a moment, though she blinked the tears back before they could fall. She wasn't trying to appear strong. She simply understood that some emotions were too intimate for public display. Samuel looked at her with solemn respect. You are not responsible for the cruelty of others, but you are the one who can reveal it. Naomi breathed out slowly, gathering her composure. Her voice regained its gentle steadiness. Show me everything, every record, every connection. Bring the truth into the open. Marcus touched her shoulder briefly. We're with you. Later that day, interviews poured across television screens, podcasts, live streams. Experts argued. Commentators dissected every angle. But something remarkable began to happen. People who had never spoken before now shared their own stories. Stories of disrespect, Stories of being misjudged. Stories of the quiet burdens carried by those whose presence was often questioned rather than welcomed. Naomi watched a few clips. Her chest tightened with empathy. The ripple had become a wave, one she had not asked for, but one she understood deeply. Her name was no longer just a trending topic. It had become a vessel for voices long ignored. Marcus returned to the suite at dusk, carrying a stack of printed reports. "Things are changing," he said. "People are seeing clearly for the first time." Naomi gave him a gentle nod. "Clarity is painful?" "Painful," he agreed, "but necessary." She looked at the reports, then at Marcus. "What comes next?" He exhaled, slow and steady. "Truth and consequences." A quiet resolve settled over her. She felt her inner strength gather into something steady and immovable. The storm was no longer approaching. It was here, and she was ready. The movement of the city outside Naomi's suite felt strangely distant, as if she were watching a world she no longer fully belonged to. Cars rolled along the street below. People hurried across sidewalks, unaware that the story consuming the country was unfolding just a few floors above them. She stood at the window for a quiet moment, hands loosely clasped in front of her. A part of her longed for solitude, for silence untouched by headlines or investigations. Yet she knew that turning away now would betray something deeper than her own pain. It would abandon every person who had ever been pushed aside in a world built on invisible hierarchies. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. Marcus stepped in with a weary look. Behind him, Samuel followed with a tablet in hand and a seriousness that tightened the room. "We uncovered more," Samuel said, moving toward the table. "And it's worse than we thought." Naomi walked over, bracing herself gently. "Show me." Samuel tapped the screen. Lines of encrypted messages filled the display, each one decoded and time-stamped. One message caught her attention immediately. "Remove her from the flight. Avoid escalation. Do not leave marks." Her breath stilled. "Who sent that?" she asked. "Not Daniel Morris." Samuel replied. He was following instructions. This message came from an external third party. The routing leads back to a private server used by Helios Defense Solutions. Marcus frowned. So they not only coordinated the harassment and forced removal, they attempted to script it. Samuel nodded. This was designed to appear like a routine incident, just another passenger labeled difficult. They tried to make it untraceable. Naomi pressed her fingers against the edge of the table. A tremor passed through her hand before she steadied herself again. They assumed bias would do the rest. She whispered. Marcus placed a comforting hand near hers, but didn't touch her directly. He understood her need for space. They believed your dignity would get lost in the noise. Samuel scrolled to another line. "There's more. This message here was sent to Victoria Langford 3 minutes before she confronted you. Ensure she reacts emotionally." Naomi's jaw tightened. She felt a slow ache rise from somewhere deep inside her. Not from anger alone, but from recognition of an old, familiar wound, the expectation that a black woman would lose her composure. She lifted her eyes toward Samuel. They built the trap around the stereotype. Samuel's expression softened. "And they expected you to fall into it." Naomi drew in a steady breath. "I didn't." Marcus looked at her with quiet pride. "No, you didn't." But she could not celebrate that truth. Not when she knew how many others women who looked like her, women without the protection of cameras or public outrage, had been punished all the same. Samuel cleared his throat. "There's something else we need to discuss. You may want to sit down." Naomi remained standing. "Say it." Samuel hesitated. "We intercepted a communication from Brock Landon. He issued a warning to his internal team. He believes you'll be cooperating with federal investigators. He called you a risk that must be contained quickly." Marcus's head snapped toward Samuel. "Contained? What does that mean?" Samuel shook his head. "We don't know. but it doesn't sound like a public relations strategy. A dense quiet settled over the room. Naomi swallowed. So now I'm a target. Marcus's voice carried a protective edge. We'll get security. Real security. You won't be alone for a moment. Naomi lifted a hand gently. I won't live in fear. Not for them. That isn't fear. Marcus argued. It's caution. But Naomi stepped away, needing space to breathe. She moved toward the far side of the room, running her hands along the smooth wooden surface of the desk. Her thoughts churned with worry, not for herself, but for the integrity of the project she carried and for the lives shaped by its outcome. She heard Samuel's voice come from behind her, quiet and sincere. You're allowed to feel shaken. Naomi, she closed her eyes for a brief moment. I'm not shaken. I'm tired of being seen through someone else's fear. Turning back, she found Marcus watching her with a mix of concern and admiration. We'll handle anything they try, he assured. I know, she said gently. But this fight is larger than me. Samuel set the tablet down. That truth is the reason people are listening. Naomi approached the table again, brushing her fingers lightly over the folder of evidence. Do we have enough to bring this forward? Samuel thought for a moment. We have more than enough to open a federal inquiry. But for charges, we need one more thing. What is it a link between Brock Landon and the payment that went to Daniel Morris? We need proof that Helios funded the harassment. Naomi nodded slowly. So we keep digging. Marcus leaned back in his chair. The internet is already demanding accountability. Influential leaders have started speaking out. People want justice, not spectacle. A faint, almost sad smile touched Naomi's face. Justice is rarely clean, Samuel added. No one expects you to shoulder this alone. But she shook her head. I don't shoulder it alone. I carry it with every person who sees themselves in this story. Marcus stood, crossing his arms thoughtfully. There's one more thing. Richard Hanover asked if he could meet you again later today. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Why he wants to help. He believes exposing the network behind this will allow North Star to rebuild with transparency, Samuel added. He's scared, but not of you. He's scared of discovering how deeply his own airline was compromised. Naomi considered this in silence. She felt empathy stirring unexpectedly, even in the middle of chaos. She tried to see the human beneath the role. Schedule the meeting, she said. Marcus nodded, before he could speak again. Naomi's phone lit up. A new message appeared from an unknown number. Back off the investigation. This will get dangerous for you. Marcus reached for the device instinctively, but Naomi pulled it close. She reread the words, feeling neither fear nor panic. Instead, an unyielding calm settled over her. Something inside her shifted from defense to resolve. Samuel stepped closer. You need to report that. I will, Naomi said softly. Marcus studied her expression. You're not retreating. No, she answered. Because everything they fear is already coming. She walked toward the window again, letting the light wrap around her shoulders. The path ahead was no longer clouded by confusion. The truth stood clearly, even if hidden in shadows. Someone had tried to break her. Someone had failed. And now she would walk forward with every intention of revealing the full shape of the darkness behind them. The hallway outside the secured conference suite stretched long and quiet, softened by the muted carpet and faint overhead lights. Naomi walked with measured steps, feeling the subtle tremor beneath her ribs, the sort that came not from fear but from the weight of choosing to continue. With each passing minute, the investigation grew sharper, the stakes taller, the shadows behind the truth darker. Marcus and Samuel followed close behind. Their voices were low, exchanging fragments of strategy as they approached the room where North Star's data forensics team waited. Naomi slowed at the door, grounding herself in a long breath. You're ready, Marcus murmured. She turned to him with a gentle nod. I have to be. They stepped inside. Richard Hanover rose immediately from his seat. His exhaustion had deepened since their previous meeting. Despite the fine cut of his suit, he looked like a man fighting to steady a collapsing structure with his bare hands. Dr. Ellington, he said quietly. Thank you for coming. Naomi settled into her chair. She kept her posture calm, balanced, the same stillness she had relied on during long negotiations and high-pressure presentations. Only now that stillness protected her from something more personal. Richard gestured to his lead analyst, a woman named Ingrid Park. Ingrid connected her laptop to the projector, her fingers moving swiftly. The screen lit up with a web of digital traces, each line representing a decision someone tried to hide. We found something, Ingrid said, something definitive. Samuel leaned forward. What kind of something? Ingrid zoomed in on a small cluster of nodes. A payment trail, encrypted, masked through several transfers. But one of the servers made a mistake. It left a timestamp exposed. She tapped a key. A transaction record appeared. Amount $75,000. Sender Helios Defense Solutions. Recipient a private account belonging to Daniel Morris. Richard exhaled a quiet sound that was neither relief nor despair, only recognition of a truth he had dreaded. Marcus rested both hands on the table. That ties Helios directly to the removal. Naomi's heart tightened. She stared at the screen, not with shock, but with a slow acceptance that this moment had been coming. She had been dragged from her seat so another entity could inch closer to a government contract. Her humiliation had been calculated. A chess move. Ingrid clicked again. There's more. Another line appeared. Payment $20,000. Sender Helios Defense Solutions. Recipient Sherry Collins. Naomi felt an ache bloom in her chest. Sherry. The gate agent who had watched her walk away with an uneasy guilt in her eyes. To see the truth attached to her name now left a quiet sting. People harmed others for reasons that were almost always smaller than the damage they created. Sherry took the money, Naomi whispered. Samuel's jaw tightened. Every piece aligns with sabotage. Richard stepped back from the table. His voice trembled slightly. I cannot express how ashamed I am that my airline became a weapon in someone else's hands. Naomi looked at him with steady eyes. Your employees chose to act. The prejudice was theirs. The orchestration was Helios. Ingrid cleared her throat softly. There's one final connection. Naomi nodded for her to continue. Ingrid zoomed out until the web of data widened. A final node flashed bright at the center of the pattern. Brock Landon. A hush fell over the room. He sent the instructions, Ingrid said quietly, not directly to the crew, but to the intermediary who then passed them along. We confirmed it through voice pattern analysis. That recording was buried in a server backup. Marcus's eyes widened. You have his voice? Yes? Samuel exhaled slowly, grounding himself. This is enough for federal indictments. Naomi sat very still. The quiet around her deepened until it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. She recalled what Brock had once said to her at a cybersecurity expo, spoken with a charming smile that carried too much calculation. Everyone has a pressure point? Dr. Ellington. Even you. She had not understood then what he meant. She understood now. He had tried to manufacture hers. Richard spoke again, voice tight. Dr. Ellington, I want you to hear something. He nodded at Ingrid. She opened an audio file. A male voice came through the speakers, low, impatient, unmistakably confident. Remove her cleanly and I don't care how. She cannot make that meeting. Naomi felt her pulse slow. The room seemed to shrink around her, the weight of those words pressing into her ribs. Marcus watched her, trying to read if she needed support. But she only drew a breath, steady and deep. She cannot make that meeting. Naomi repeated softly. Samuel whispered. He targeted your position, your reputation, your voice. Naomi looked at the team gathered around her. He targeted everything I've built, everything I've protected. Her eyes softened, but he didn't break it. Marcus nodded. No, he didn't. Samuel stepped toward the projector. This is the evidence that will bring him down. Naomi held his gaze. This is the evidence that will expose the entire structure that believed this tactic would work. Richard lowered himself into his chair, visibly shaken. I wish I could undo what my people did. Naomi's tone remained gentle. Regret is a beginning, not a solution. Samuel closed the laptop. We need to get this to the DOJ. Marcus added, Helios will panic when they learn what we uncovered. Naomi's phone buzzed again. A new message from the unknown number. You are stepping into a fight you cannot win. She turned the screen toward Samuel. Add this to the report. Marcus touched her elbow lightly. Are you all right? Naomi's eyes held quiet determination. I am tired, but I am not afraid. Richard spoke, voice stripped of any corporate barrier. If Helios targeted you to secure that contract, they targeted national security. You were not the only one endangered. Naomi nodded slowly. I understand. And in that moment, she felt something shift inside herself. Not anger, not vengeance. Something deeper. A calling she had not chosen but could no longer step away from. Samuel placed the evidence file into his briefcase. We should move quickly. Naomi lifted her chin. I'll give my statement. Every detail. Marcus studied her closely. You're sure? Yes, she said. If someone tried to silence me, my voice becomes even more necessary. The group gathered their belongings, tension and resolve mingling in the air. Naomi walked toward the door, pausing for a moment. Beyond this threshold, nothing would be simple. Nothing would return to how it once was. Yet she felt an inner strength rise with each breath. The breaking point had arrived. But she did not break. The corridor leading to the federal chamber felt impossibly long. Naomi walked at a quiet pace beside Marcus and Samuel, the low murmur of reporters echoing behind the security barricades. The hum of cameras filled the air like a restless current, capturing every step she took, every tilt of her head, every simple breath rising and falling in her chest. She had testified before large committees in the past, but this time the gravity felt different. This was no technical briefing or policy review. This was her life dissected beneath white lights and unforgiving scrutiny. And beyond that, hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and ambition, someone who once worked in the same halls she did had decided she was an obstacle worth destroying. As they approached the chamber doors, Marcus placed a steady hand near her back. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a pillar she leaned toward. You're ready, he reminded gently. Naomi lifted her chin. I know. Samuel handed her a small folder. Your opening statement. You don't need to read it word for word. Just let it guide you. She nodded, though she already knew she wouldn't look at the pages. Every truth she carried had carved itself into her memory long before any of them entered a building like this. 2 federal security officers opened the chamber doors. A hush spread through the gallery as Naomi walked inside. Senators lined the raised platform, seated beneath the seal of the United States. Cameras perched along the back wall. A row of legal observers filled the side benches. At the center of the witness table sat a single microphone, illuminated by an overhead light. She approached it with calm steps. And then she saw him. Brock Landon sat 3 rows back, flanked by attorneys. His suit was immaculate, his expression polished into neutrality. His posture conveyed the confidence of a man who always believed he could bend outcomes to his advantage. His eyes, however, flickered when Naomi's gaze touched him. She held his stare for one long, steady moment before taking her seat. The lead senator, Abigail Monroe, adjusted her glasses. Her voice carried through the speakers with firm clarity. This hearing will address the events surrounding Flight 2184 and the allegations of interference with the federal cybersecurity evaluation process. Dr. Naomi Ellington, thank you for being here. You may begin when ready. Naomi placed her hands gently on the table. For a moment, she allowed silence to breathe between her and the room. It was not hesitation. It was intention. She wanted every person present to feel the weight of truth not forced, but earned. When I boarded that aircraft, she began softly, I was traveling to deliver a final assessment for a national cybersecurity initiative. My role required careful judgment, fairness, and clarity. I had prepared for that responsibility with everything I am. What I did not prepare for was the level of hostility I would face before I even reached my seat. The chamber grew still. I was confronted in a way that did not reflect any policy, but rather a long history of assumptions about who belongs in a place of privilege. I tried to respond with calm. I tried to reason, yet none of that mattered. My presence was viewed as a threat, and that perception became an excuse to strip away my dignity. Her voice deepened, though she kept it controlled. I want to be very clear, this was not a misunderstanding. It was not a dispute between passengers. It was the deliberate removal of a woman who had every right to be where she was. She looked directly at the panel, and as evidence has shown, it was orchestrated. Senator Monroe folded her hands. We have received documentation linking Helios Defense Solutions to payments made to North Star personnel. Can you confirm the accuracy of these findings? Yes, Naomi answered. I have reviewed the records, the messages, the voice analysis. The orchestration was purposeful. The goal was simple. Prevent me from delivering my assessment and create enough confusion to delay the review, so that Helios could gain advantage in the process. Monroe said, Yes. A low murmur spread through the audience before the senator quieted the room. Naomi continued, What they underestimated was not my influence. They underestimated the visibility of injustice. They assumed their actions would blend into the well-worn pattern of bias that many people have learned to endure quietly. Her eyes drifted briefly toward Brock Landon. His composure remained intact, but a faint tension now held the corners of his jaw. Senator Monroe shifted her attention. Mr. Landon, you will have an opportunity to respond. For now, remain silent. Naomi resumed. I do not stand here seeking retribution. I stand here seeking acknowledgement of a deeper harm. When people in positions of power believe they can manipulate systems at the expense of others, they damage more than reputations. They damage trust. And trust is the backbone of every institution, from airlines to federal programs. She paused, letting her breath settle. Yet I also stand here to say this: the truth did not stay buried. It found its way to the surface because ordinary people chose to speak, chose to record, chose to question, chose to care. Justice begins with clarity, not anger. Senator Monroe nodded slowly, impressed. Thank you, Dr. Ellington. We have questions. The next 2 hours unfolded with careful inquiry. Naomi responded with precision, navigating each detail without faltering. She explained the timeline, the emotional impact, the professional sabotage. She refused exaggeration, letting restraint speak louder than any raised voice could. Every so often, she felt Brock's eyes on her. When the senators finally called his name, the air shifted. Mr. Landon, Monroe said, please step forward. Brock rose with mechanical calm, yet Naomi noticed a small stiffness in his movements, a sign betraying his inner fear. He took the seat across from her. His attorney spoke first. My client denies any involvement. Senator Monroe raised a hand. We will hear directly from Mr. Landon? Brock clasped his hands together. I had no knowledge of such transactions. Helios Defense Solutions would never authorize. Naomi gently leaned toward the microphone. Your voice is on the recording. Brock froze. For a moment, the chamber turned silent enough for Naomi to hear her own heartbeat. She watched the change flicker across his face, like a man realizing the ground beneath him had shifted. Senator Monroe nodded to the clerk. The recording played. Remove her cleanly? I don't care how. She cannot make that meeting. Brock's expression faltered. A murmur broke through the crowd. Naomi kept her eyes on him, steady and unwavering. She was not angry. She was not triumphant. She was simply present, rooted in truth. Senator Monroe spoke firmly. Mr. Landon, do you deny this is your voice? Brock swallowed. His silence answered before his words could. When the recording ended, Naomi straightened her shoulders, feeling a quiet release settle through her muscles. The confrontation she never sought had found its natural conclusion. She had faced him, and she had not wavered. At the end of the session, Senator Monroe offered a final remark. Dr. Ellington, thank you for your courage. As Naomi stood to leave, Marcus approached with a soft smile. You were remarkable. Samuel touched the back of her chair. There is more work ahead, but the truth is on record now. Naomi looked around the chamber one last time. The brightest light still burned overhead, but they no longer felt harsh. They felt cleansing. She walked out with calm dignity. The tide had turned, and the darkness had nowhere left to hide. The wind outside the federal building carried a soft chill as Naomi stepped out, escorted by security through a quiet side entrance to avoid the clusters of cameras at the front. She paused beneath the shade of an old oak tree that stood beside the walkway. Its branches stretched wide, offering a moment of shelter as if the world itself wanted her to breathe again. Marcus came alongside her with a gentle exhale. It's done. The testimonies, the evidence, everything. You carried it with such grace. Samuel joined them, adjusting the strap of his briefcase. The senators will file immediate motions. Once the DOJ finishes compiling, the arrests will begin. Naomi nodded slowly. She wasn't relieved. Not yet. Something in her needed quiet space to absorb the weight of what had unfolded inside those marble walls. The truth had been spoken aloud. The recording had played for the nation. Brock Landon's silence had been louder than any argument, but the gravity of everything lingered like a heaviness beneath her ribs. They made their way to the awaiting car. Marcus opened the door, but Naomi held his wrist lightly. I want a minute, she whispered. He stepped back, letting her stand beside the oak tree again. Samuel waited a few paces away, giving her the privacy she needed. Naomi closed her eyes. The voices from the chamber still echoed faintly in her mind. Each question, each answer, each moment of confrontation carved its own imprint. She replayed her own words, her own calm, her own steady restraint, as if searching for the place within herself where that strength had truly been born. She remembered being 6 years old, sitting beside her grandmother on a small porch in Savannah. Her grandmother's voice low and steady, saying, people will try to tell you who you are by how they treat you. Your power is deciding they're wrong. That memory warmed her from within. Naomi opened her eyes. The world had tried to tell her she didn't belong in that seat on that plane, but she had chosen otherwise. Marcus approached again, waiting for her signal. She gave a nod and slipped into the car. As they drove through city streets, silence settled among them with an unexpected comfort. Half an hour later, they arrived at a secure office floor where federal agents gathered. Screens lit up the room. Maps, profiles, financial logs floated across digital walls. The energy was focused, urgent. An agent approached Samuel and handed him 2 printed notices. It's official, the agent said. Arrest warrants have been approved. Samuel read the papers with a slow nod. Who's first? The agent pointed toward the names. Brock Landon, the intermediary. Seth Warren, North Star employees Daniel Morris and Sherry Collins. Marcus glanced at Naomi. You ready for this part? She folded her hands in her lap. No one is ready for this part. But I understand why it's necessary. Agents began moving with purpose, gathering equipment and preparing to deploy. Naomi observed everything quietly, feeling the tension between justice and sorrow. Justice always came at a cost, and even if the outcome was right, the journey toward accountability carried a strange ache. A few minutes later, screens flickered with the live footage. A quiet suburban street, a home with trimmed hedges and a manicured lawn, and federal vehicles pulling up to the curb. Naomi's breath held briefly, The agents approached the door with measured steps. Brock Landon appeared in the doorway. A look of disbelief etched across his face. His attorney wasn't there this time. His practiced confidence faltered. An agent spoke calmly. Naomi couldn't hear the words, but she saw Brock's shoulders tighten, then slump, as cuffs were placed on his wrists. His eyes lifted toward the agents, searching for control he no longer had. For the briefest moment, their eyes met through the screen. Naomi didn't feel triumph. She felt closure. The footage switched to another scene. Sherry Collins stood beside her car in a grocery parking lot, tears streaming uncontrollably as agents approached. Her fear filled the screen in a harsh, painful way. Naomi swallowed. She didn't want to watch. She made a choice. Samuel said softly. "I know," Naomi whispered. "But choice doesn't erase humanity." Marcus placed a hand near her arm. "You always lead with compassion. That's why you've made it this far." The next arrest flickered across the screen. Daniel Morris walked out of an apartment building, expression numb, accepting his fate with a slow shuffle. And then Seth Warren, the final link, whose face twisted with anger as he was taken into custody. The room exhaled collectively when the final feed ended. An agent returned with a small nod. All targets secured? Samuel looked to Naomi. "The hardest part is over." She shook her head gently. "The hardest part will be rebuilding trust." Marcus leaned against the table. "You're allowed to rest now." Naomi. A tired smile touched her lips. "Rest feels like a distant country." He chuckled softly. "Then visit it sometime." The three of them moved into a quieter side room. A window overlooked the skyline, painted with soft gold. Naomi stepped closer to it, letting her hands rest lightly against the cool glass. "I didn't want any of this," she murmured. "We know," Marcus said. "But maybe it needed to happen," Samuel added, "for reasons bigger than us." Naomi's reflection in the window looked older than she felt, but also steadier. She saw strength where she once saw strain. She saw clarity where she once saw doubt. "People are talking," Marcus said. "Communities across the country are sharing what they've lived through. Your courage is helping others find their voice." Naomi closed her eyes again, letting the words settle. "I didn't do it alone." "No," Samuel said. "But you were the first one who refused to be quiet." A soft knock echoed from behind them. The door opened, revealing Richard Hanover. His expression was humble, lined with remorse and newfound resolve. "Dr. Ellington?" he said quietly. "I came to thank you for your truth, for giving this industry a chance to change." Naomi turned to him with a gentle, tired smile. "Change begins with acknowledgement." Richard nodded. "And I intend to follow through. North Star will rebuild from the inside out." She studied him for a moment, sensing sincerity. "Then start with the people you've ignored for too long." "I will." Naomi returned to the window. The gold light softened as the day shifted. The city felt calmer than it had in a long time. "This isn't the end," she said softly. Samuel nodded. "No, it's the beginning." And for the first time since the nightmare on that aircraft, Naomi felt a quiet hope rise within her. Not loud or triumphant, just steady, just human. A hope that whispered change could take root, and maybe, just maybe, this time it would last. The morning light settled gently across the cityscape as Naomi stepped into the quiet lounge of the newly renovated terminal. She paused just beyond the entrance, letting her eyes trace the softened glow reflecting off polished floors and tall windows. There was a peaceful hum in the air. Conversations drifted gently. Luggage wheels rolled in a steady rhythm. Everything felt calmer than she remembered. Several weeks had passed since the arrests, the investigations, the hearings, the headlines. Weeks filled with long meetings, private conversations, and moments when she had to relearn how to breathe without bracing for another blow. Yet here she was, moving through the world with the steadiness she had earned piece by piece. Marcus and Samuel followed close behind her, each carrying folders for the meeting they would attend later in Washington. The three had become a quiet team, bound not only by necessity but by the faith they had placed in each other. Naomi's steps slowed as they approached the new North Star Inclusion and Ethics display near the center of the lounge. A wide digital panel showcased statements of commitment, training initiatives, and redesigned protocols. A small portrait of her hung near the bottom corner, paired with a quote she had offered reluctantly. "Dignity is not a privilege. It is the foundation of every interaction, every system, every choice." She paused in front of the display, studying it. She didn't feel pride. She didn't feel possession. She felt responsibility. A responsibility that would outlive this moment, this investigation, even this scandal. Samuel came to stand beside her. They listened. Naomi nodded softly. "Listening is the first step. Change depends on what they do next," Marcus added. "They built the new training program in collaboration with your team." "That's something." Naomi smiled quietly. "It is." She turned and continued toward the private concourse where her group would aboard their flight. As she moved, she caught sight of a young black woman in a North Star uniform standing near the help desk. The woman glanced up, recognition lighting her face with an almost shy smile. She approached Naomi slowly. "Dr. Ellington?" she said gently. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Naomi shook her head. "Not at all." The young woman took a steady breath. "My name is Kira. I work operations here. I wanted to say thank you. Things are different now. We're heard. We're protected. The new system lets us speak when something feels wrong." A warm stillness rose in Naomi's chest. "You deserve safe places to work." Kira nodded. "You showed us what dignity looks like when it's defended." Naomi held the young woman's gaze, touched deeply by the sincerity in her voice. "Take care of yourself, Kira, and look out for others. Change lasts when people like you carry it forward." Kira's eyes glistened before she stepped back with a grateful nod. As Naomi continued walking, she found a seat near the window while Marcus coordinated with staff at the nearby desk. Samuel sat across from her, flipping through his notes, though his attention remained partly on her. "You're quiet," he said softly. "Just thinking. About everything." "About what comes next," she answered. He placed his notes aside. "You've rebuilt more than your reputation. You've influenced policy, training, oversight." Naomi smiled faintly. "Influence means nothing without persistence. You have plenty of that." She looked out toward the runway where an aircraft glided across the pavement. The engines rumbled in the distance, steady and calm. That sound once triggered a tightness in her chest. Now it felt different, balanced, familiar. Marcus returned with a small envelope. "Naomi, this just arrived for you." Someone from the front desk dropped it off. She accepted the envelope, surprised by its weight. Inside was a handwritten note on elegant stationery. "Dr. Ellington, your courage has changed our industry. We will work to ensure your efforts are never forgotten. With respect, Richard Hanover." Beneath his signature was a second sheet containing a registry of the new policy reforms North Star had implemented. Transparent complaint procedures, mandatory bias training led by third-party specialists, clear accountability structures, protections for whistleblowers, oversight audits. She folded the note carefully. A small piece settled over her. Marcus leaned closer. "He's trying." "He is," Naomi said quietly. "And for once, that feels genuine." Just then, an overhead announcement echoed softly through the lounge. Final call for her flight. The three exchanged glances before gathering their things. As they walked toward the jet bridge, Naomi felt her pulse slow into a calm rhythm. This bridge looked just like the one she had walked down on the day everything fell apart. Yet something about the air, the quiet energy, felt transformed. Halfway down the corridor, an elderly woman with silver hair approached them hesitantly. Her small suitcase wobbled at her side. "Dr. Ellington," she asked in a trembling voice, Naomi paused. Yes. The woman's eyes softened with emotion. I watched your testimony. I watched the hearings. I want you to know that what you endured, it made me see things I should have noticed long ago. I'm sorry for staying silent for so many years. Naomi touched the woman's hand lightly. Awareness is powerful, and it's never too late. The woman exhaled shakily before stepping away with a grateful nod. Marcus waited until she was gone before speaking again. You've touched more people than you realize. Naomi smiled gently. I don't need them to see me. I need them to see each other. They reached the aircraft door. A new flight attendant greeted them with warm sincerity, recognizing Naomi without gawking, without pity, without the subtle distrust she once felt so often. Welcome aboard. Dr. Ellington, she said softly. If you need anything, please let us know. Naomi thanked her and stepped into the cabin, settling into her seat. She eased into the cushions, feeling the quiet hum beneath her feet. Marcus and Samuel sat nearby, giving her space yet staying close, as they always did. Finally, Naomi rested her head back and let her breath flow out in a slow release. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. Passengers continued to board. A young couple murmured softly behind her. A father helped his daughter with her backpack across the aisle. Life unfolded gently around her. A quiet voice inside her whispered something she hadn't let herself consider for a long time. You're safe. She closed her eyes. Not every story could undo the past, but some stories could reshape the future. And this one, born from humiliation and injustice, had transformed into something larger than any single person. It had become a movement. And as the aircraft lifted into the sky, Naomi felt a new horizon unfolding ahead of her, steady, bright, and filled with possibilities waiting to be built. Not by force, but by dignity. Naomi Ellington's story is not just an airline incident, but a microcosm of so much that goes on quietly around us: injustice, prejudice, and the pain that those involved often silently swallow. But from that adversity, the story brings a powerful message for anyone, especially those who have gone through many ups and downs in life. First, dignity is always the most precious asset of every human being. Naomi was insulted, disrespected, but she did not choose to react with anger or chaos. She chose calmness, a kind of strength that only those who have experienced it can understand. Second, change only comes when someone steps up. One right action, however inconvenient and painful, can pave the way for major reforms that spare others the same pain. Third, the story reminds us that peace does not come from avoidance, but from facing the truth, even when it is difficult. If you've been through a lot, you'll see yourself somewhere in Naomi's journey, resilient, patient, and always getting back up gracefully. Thank you for listening to this story. If you feel something touching your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. That helps us spread more emotional and valuable content to the hearts that need to be heard.